I am an Anglo-Australian who's been interested in politics for over 60 years. In that time, the US has had 11 presidents. Some, like LBJ, were good presidents. Some, like Nixon, were bad. But until the 9th of November 2016, there were none that I would have called evil. In my opinion, Donald John Trump is evil. He's a fascist, a wannabe dictator who cares nothing for the American people. His number one priority, indeed his only priority, is self-aggrandizement and how much money this grifter can extort from the American people. In this video, I briefly discuss his failure as a businessman and his failure as a president. I'll also explain why I believe he is a fascist by comparing some of the things he has said and done to the most famous fascist of all time, Adolf Hitler. I end by outlining how I would like to see him spend the rest of his sad, pathetic life. I have no doubt that some of you who might see this will have an attack of the vapors, clutch your pearls and whine about what I have said, but I don't care. Now, on to the video. In 1961, the Washington newspaper, the Evening Star, credited Huey Long with saying that fascism would come to this country, but it would appear in another guise. It would come wrapped in a flag, claiming to be the savior of democracy. Whether Huey Long or some other person was the originator, it was a very prescient statement. In 1917, the Muncie Sunday Star presented a quotation from a speech by Labour activist Eugene V. Debs that was just as prescient, if not more so, because he included religion. He said that every robber or oppressor in history has wrapped himself in a cloak of patriotism or religion or both. On the 8th of November 2016, fascism arrived in the United States. It was dressed in a business suit, wrapped in a flag and carrying a Bible. Despite losing the popular vote and because of the undemocratic Electoral College, Donald Trump became the 45th President of the United States. Donald Trump had campaigned on his claimed business acumen, but in reality he wasn't as successful as he claimed to be. Although he never personally bankrupted, hotels and other businesses he owned had declared bankruptcy 6 times between 1991 and 2009. 3 of the businesses he managed to bankrupt would normally have been cash-making machines, casinos. This genius of a businessman owned 3 casinos in Atlantic City, all located within a few hundred meters of each other and all competing against each other. He was the owner of the New Jersey Generals football team. He described them as the best team in football, but just like many other businesses Trump got his hands on, they failed. He has many other business failures to his name, including Trump Steaks, Trump Vodka, Trump Mortgages, and Trump University. Although he would never admit it, Trump has a long and storied history of failure. That long history of failure includes his time as US President. He made a number of promises. Promise number 1. During his campaign, he promised to build a wall along the entire 1,200-mile-long southern border and that Mexico will pay for it. He got nowhere near completing the wall and he spent billions of US taxpayer dollars on it. Mexico paid nothing. Promise number 2. He promised to ban Muslims from entering the country. He signed an executive order to ban them, but the order was immediately challenged in the courts and struck down. Promise number 3. He promised to bring manufacturing jobs back. He was remarkably successful with this promise, losing over 800,000 manufacturing jobs. Promise number 4. He promised to impose tariffs on China and Mexico. With this one, he demonstrated just how financially ignorant he is. He lied to the American people when he told them that China and Mexico would pay the tariffs. In fact, a tariff on foreign imports is a payment levied on the importer at the port of arrival in the country. In other words, it was the people living in America that paid for the tariffs because the price increases for the importer were passed on to the customer. He did keep this promise, but in keeping it, he had a devastating impact on the US economy. Promise number 5. He promised to renegotiate or withdraw from the North American Free Trade Agreement and the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Pains me to admit it, but he kept these promises as well. The North American Agreement was renegotiated, but he withdrew from the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Based on his long history of racism, I believe he left the Trans-Pacific Partnership simply because it was an agreement that his predecessor, an African American, had negotiated. He did keep this promise, but in leaving the Trans-Pacific Partnership, he destroyed a partnership that would have greatly benefited all of the participants. Promise number 6. He promised to repeal the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare. Whenever he was asked when it was going to be replaced, his response was to say it would be published in 2 weeks. In the 2024 presidential debate between Trump and Vice President Harris, Trump famously said that he had concepts of a plan. Concepts. Promise number 7. He promised to renegotiate the Iran deal. He broke this promise too, because he made no attempt at renegotiation. He simply withdrew the US from the agreement. Withdrawing from the agreement is, in my opinion, the most dangerous thing that Trump ever did. While the deal was in place, Iran was not enriching uranium, so had not been able to build nuclear weapons. After he withdrew, Iran immediately started a uranium enrichment program, which will lead to them having nuclear weapons sooner rather than later. I can imagine fewer, more dangerous scenarios than a fundamentalist Islamic regime having nuclear weapons, especially when you remember that they finance terrorist organisations like Hezbollah and Hamas. Promise number 8. Trump promised that he wouldn't touch Social Security. He didn't, but not because he cares about the people who need Social Security. His reason was purely political, because he knew that it would lose votes in an election. He even promised to increase the payments, but broke that promise too. Promise number 9. He promised to cut taxes. He kept this promise, but the American people in general didn't benefit from his tax cuts. Trump, mega millionaires, billionaires, and big corporations benefited by getting the vast bulk of the trillions of dollars of the tax cut. In 2025, the top 1% will receive tax cuts of around $60,000 compared to an average tax cut of $500 for the people in the bottom 60%. His tax cut added $1.9 trillion to the US debt. Promise number 10. Even though the US was already bombing oil assets controlled by them. To take the oil from ISIS would have required an invasion of Syria with a plan for the long-term occupation of the country. Another thing that Trump didn't appear to consider was the Russian involvement in Syria. The Russians have been allied to Syria for decades and may well have interceded had the Syrians requested it. If you like what I have to say, please hit like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Comments, positive and negative, are welcome. Add them below and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you. Trump's failure when COVID struck is well documented, so I'm not going to say much about it here. I will say that it was his lying and incompetence that led directly to the unnecessary deaths of hundreds of thousands of Americans. As we all know, as the 2020 election was approaching, Trump started telling his supporters that the only way he could possibly lose was if Biden was to rig the election. He was setting the stage for the inevitable loss on the 3rd of November 2020. After his loss, he fomented an insurrection which led to the deaths of 6 people and his second impeachment. After Biden's inauguration, sanity in the US government was to return, but Trump's mental decline increased pace. Since he was ousted, his hateful rhetoric has continued, which leads me to the topic of this video. Namely, that when fascism arrives in America, it will be wrapped in a flag and claimed to be the saviour of democracy. The most famous fascist of all time has got to be Adolf Hitler, a person who Trump has in many ways emulated. Hitler demanded that every government employee and every soldier, airman and sailor swear fealty to him and not to the German people. Like Hitler, Trump has demanded that everyone swear fealty to him and not to the Constitution. Hitler continuously claimed that only he could solve Germany's problems. Trump has claimed many times that only he is capable of solving the problems the US faces. Hitler said that the news media, at the time the papers and radio, were spreaders of fake news whenever they criticised him. Trump has done exactly the same for years. Hitler said that the Jews, Gypsies and Slavs were destroying the blood of the country. Trump has said the same about Muslims, Hispanics, Africans and anyone else who isn't a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, white-skinned person. Hitler is infamous for marginalizing Jews. Trump's chosen group to target were Muslims and Mexicans. In both cases, the target group was painted as evil, intent on destroying the country, and in both cases, that was a lie. Trump rounded up his enemies and placed them in detention camps. His original aim was to deport them to places like Madagascar or somewhere east of the Urals where they could starve to death for all he cared. Trump has promised that, if he's elected in 2024, he will round up all the so-called illegals, place them in detention camps and deport them. Hitler referred to disabled people as useless eaters. Trump has referred to disabled soldiers as suckers and losers, questioning why they went to war by asking what was in it for them. He also stated that he didn't want to see disabled soldiers because they made him queasy. Hitler removed many of the rights that the German people had. Trump removed a woman's right to make decisions about her own body when he appointed 3 ultra-right-wing Christo-fascists to the Supreme Court with the express intention of overturning Roe. 2 of the judges on the Supreme Court have stated that other rights, such as same-sex marriage and interracial marriage, are in their sights. Trump's appointment of those 3 evangelical Christians to the court has almost guaranteed that, should a suitable case come before them, they will strike down those rights. In Project 2025, Trump and his acolytes have stated that they intend to overturn other rights, particularly voting rights, to eradicate the Department of Education, to remove Social Security and scrap Medicare, and that they want to see their version of Christianity made the official religion of the United States, contrary to the Establishment Clause of the Constitution. Trump's niece, Mary Trump, who is a clinical psychologist, has, along with many other highly respected psychologists and psychiatrists, described Trump as a pathological liar, a malignant narcissist who cares for one person and one person only, himself. I don't think that he really loves his children because he doesn't know the meaning of the word love. I don't believe that he really loves his current wife, Melania. We know this to be true because he was having a full-blown affair with a Playboy model while Melania was pregnant with Barron and cheated on both his wife and his mistress by having a sexual fling with a porn star shortly after Melania had given birth. He demonstrated his love for his first wife by burying her in an unkempt area of a golf course he owns. He doesn't care about the people who voted for him in 2016 and 2020. All he cares about is their votes and the money he can grift for them. He is a weak, small-minded bully, a pathetic example of a human being with 34 felony convictions, and hopefully more to come. He's unfit to hold any position of authority, let alone be President of the United States again. He's a traitor who would sell out his own country if he thought he could make a buck out of it. I'm going to end with these thoughts. I believe that he will go down in history as the most incompetent president in the history of the United States. And lastly, after the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, I heard some people say, "Pity they didn't kill him." Personally, I'm glad he wasn't killed, because I would like to see him spend the rest of his life where he belongs, penniless, in a jail with every aspect of his life controlled by others, being told when to get up, told when he can get a meal, having to ask permission to use a phone, a computer, or the toilet, being told when he can watch TV, only being allowed out in the sun for an hour a day, and being told what time he has to go to bed. My hope is that he lives in many more years in ignominy, a pathetic, sad, lonely, unloved old man. If you like what I have to say, please hit like, subscribe and ring that notification bell. Comments, positive and negative, are welcome. Add them below and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you.